Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, good friend of the program, Jared Weiss, is back. We're going to talk about the Boston Celtics handing the Milwaukee Bucks their first loss of the season yesterday. We're going to talk about Luke Walton apparently being in trouble. I don't know. That might be a thing. Magic Johnson and he had a stern talking to, apparently, according to Adrian Wojnarowski. So I just kind of want to chat about that quickly. And then in the second part of the podcast, we're going to talk with Chris Stone and we're going to talk NBA draft forwards as well. So Jared is with me now. Jared, how's it going, buddy?
It's going amazing. I'm driving on 2 hours sleep from one of the worst cities in America. I'm loving life right now.
Let's talk about basketball. Let's talk about the Boston Celtics. You were watching the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. Were you at the game last night?
I was. Yeah, I was half awake, but I was there.
So 117-113 is what it finishes. The Celtics, how many? I know that they had 23s going into the fourth quarter. How many did they finish with?
They finished with 24, and then in the last 2 or 3 possessions of offense that they had before it went down to fouling, they chucked up 4 3-pointers and missed all of them, trying to tie the record at 25 that Cleveland set a couple of years ago. And I asked Gordon Hayward if they were doing it on purpose because he took most of them, and he said, no, I had no idea. So take it with a grain of salt, but I thought that was a pretty funny ending. And the fact that they did all that and they still managed to hang on and win the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, that feels like the most important part to me because the Milwaukee Bucks going into that game were undefeated and certainly have seemed so far this season to be like a genuine challenger to what the Celtics are building right now. And this game served as a real barometer of where both of these teams are right now. So I want to get your perspective on this. I mean, you were there, you were up close. What did you think of how Milwaukee kind of, measured up to this arbitrary, discussion point 8 games into the season that we're having about them in Boston?
Well, the one thing that's scary about Milwaukee is that, when they were kind of developing their program, the whole talking point was that with like Malcolm Brogdon emerging and then Jabari Parker around Giannis, they're going to have such a deadly transition offense. And then, Brogdon hasn't really turned into like a really good offensive player. Jabari's gone. And yet they're still an insanely intimidating transition team just because of everything that Giannis can do. And so it's really amazing how the Celtics, so they took, I think it was 55 3-pointers or so in that game. And so they missed, 31 3-pointers. And there was kind of like a discussion had after the game about should they be taking that many 3-pointers, which I think is kind of silly because of, the whole, 3-pointers are more valuable than long twos thing and everything everyone knows. But one of the interesting flip sides to it that I thought we saw a lot in the fourth quarter, which allowed Milwaukee to come back, is that if you're missing a lot of threes, you're going to look you're more likely to have longer rebounds, which can lead to more transition opportunities for the opponent.
Yep.
And allow them to kind of run down your throats. And that happened. And, Giannis was, I can't remember if he had 10 points in the fourth quarter or how many he had, but he was like a single man stampede in the fourth quarter there. He was really thrilling to watch. And that is probably the one caveat I would say to prioritizing a 25-footer over an 18-footer is just that it can allow really good offensive transition teams to try to beat you up that way. But my other main takeaway from that game is just that I think this was probably the first game where Boston's offensive setup and their ability to go small across the board just made them impossible to guard just from a strategic standpoint because Milwaukee had Brook Lopez or John Henson out there most of the time, and they're on pick and rolls and drop coverage. And that means that the Celtics can run pick and pop and get a wide open 3-pointer every single time. And that was kind of one of the reasons why they made so many 3-pointers was like a stretch that I've been focusing on because I thought it was a really important part of Gordon Hayward's growth and his kind of return to form is at the end of the third quarter, he came into the game with like a minute 30 left or so, and they just ran 3 plays to end the half or end the quarter where him and Marcus Morris ran high middle pick and roll, and the first 2 times the center dropped deep on the pick and roll, and he was able to slip the pocket pass to Marcus Morris, who hit a wide open 3. And then on the last play, Milwaukee had to change it up, and they switched the screen, and they put, I think it was Ilyasova ended up guarding Hayward. Hayward kind of like took him out for a clear out, passed out of it too early, and then he kind of kept cutting and eventually was able to get a layup out of it when he got the ball back. But it just showed that, like, the Celtics can have 3 pick-and-roll playmakers on the floor at all times, and it just, like, it can come from anywhere on the floor. And teams like Milwaukee that have a traditional center out there who's not going to switch up high on the ball screen, they're really going to get picked apart by the Celtics running pick and pop.
Yeah, I think that is where I actually wanted to start, is the Celtics pick and pop game. I mean, you're looking at a game where Al Horford took 11 threes and Aaron Baines took 5 threes. Like that is what stood out to me immediately, especially in the first half, and even going into the second half a little bit, was that the Bucks were comfortable allowing those shots in a way that was very surprising to me. Like, they didn't even try and go out and cover them, and part of it is, hey, when you have Brook Lopez on the floor, you're probably not going to go out and really contest a lot of center three-pointers because of the way that you play pick-and-roll drop coverage. Even while Ersan was on the floor, they didn't really switch it up at all and try and get out to these pick-and-pop players, and it's interesting to me to see where this goes from both of their perspectives, because the Celtics, with Al Horford, do have a weapon who can knock down shots like this. And the Bucks do have someone on the bench in Thon Maker who has shown in the playoffs in the past that he can be more of an aggressive pick-and-roll defender. Do we start to see them, in order to potentially give teams more fits later in the season, is the best way to put it? Do they try and start developing Maker now in order to maybe show different defensive coverages later in the season whenever they get into the playoffs, and have comfort within those defensive coverages?
Well, I'm really intrigued by this situation because, Thon, obviously, it's been frustrating seeing how slowly his development is going, which, and just to go on a quick tangent, we go into the draft and we see these guys as huge projects, and we say, it's going to take 4 years until that guy's a rotation player. And then year 2, people are like, this guy's a bust, he's a piece of garbage, cut him. It's like, this is what's supposed to happen. Thon Maker's supposed to take 4 years to develop into a rotation player.
Yeah, but Thon's deal was weird too, though, because Thon showed within the first 2 playoff runs that he can be useful, and then the Bucks just kind of decided not to play him in the regular season. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly what I was about to say. It's like, I don't understand why this is happening after what he did in the playoffs last year. And I would imagine it's just that, like, these training camps aren't going well, summers aren't going well. I remember at Summer League, not this past year, the year before that, I was sitting behind Joe Prunty in the Bucks coaching staff, or all the assistant coaches, because Kidd was still the head coach at the time, and they were watching Thon guarding Walter Tavares, who was on the Cavs at the time, who was like 7'3", 300 pounds or whatever, and Tavares was like tossing him around like a rag doll. And Tavares isn't that good of a player. I think he's in Europe now, but he's a physical monster. And Prunty was like screaming. He was like sitting right under the hoop, just screaming at Thon to just physically engage him, be rigid, hit first, stuff like that. And Thon, we saw that in the playoffs last year. I think he did a pretty decent job at it, but obviously his value was just that he's so insanely long and athletic in his ability to move on the perimeter. But I feel like at this point, he's demonstrated enough that he should be the guy getting those rotation minutes, even if he's not going to start the game. And obviously Milwaukee, they were undefeated going into this game. They have the best record in the conference, and they want to be winning and being good early. But Thon is such a valuable piece that I don't understand why he's not getting force-fed minutes, even if he's still struggling. Bud has been so good at developing players as offenders over the years. I feel like he would be invested in doing this. So I'm wondering if it's something that has to do with the front office for why they're not prioritizing him. He's such a clear answer to being the final puzzle piece that makes them a legitimate finals contender, and they should be utilizing the first half of the season to do whatever they can to try to get him ready to be that guy for the second half of the year. And seeding's not nearly as important as giving Thon Maker the time out there to get beat up and learn how to fight back, so that he's actually really good by the time he gets to the playoffs.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. I guess that part of it is that Milwaukee needs to set a tone here early, maybe. Like, they need to show that they are a genuine contender, and then maybe later in the season they will start to get to this stage. But, you know, we'll see where it goes, and maybe we're spending too much time talking about Thon Maker, too, given what...
Never. Just not possible. I'm sorry. It's not possible.
Like, is there any part of us that should be worried about the fact that the Boston Celtics only won this game by 4, knocking down 24 three-pointers, while Chris Middleton, you know, really, really struggled last night? Like, he was not very good. It was by far his worst game of the season. He went 6 for 18 from the field. You know, only had 16 points, and it seemed like it was worse throughout the early portion of that game. And, like, the Celtics still only won by 4 at home. Like, there are a lot of positives that we'll talk about for the Celtics here in a minute, because like, I want to talk about Shimi Ojale for 20 minutes, but like, you know, part of me just looks at the numbers on this and is like, Milwaukee might be okay. Like, they might be able to kind of handle Boston a little bit better than what we thought.
Oh yeah, I think Milwaukee's clearly establishing that they're pretty much on the top tier of the teams in the East. So I wouldn't say beating Milwaukee by 4 at home is like a sign of an issue for Boston, because I mean, one, Milwaukee was undefeated at the time, and they were without Jaylen Brown, so they were down a starter. So I don't really see that as some sort of flag, but I do think that them letting Giannis really get out in transition and hurt them late in the game, so they couldn't really close it out with a solid win. That definitely that's a sign of concern. They need to be able to have a wire-to-wire dominant performance. And Jason Tatum's he started out really good in the first few games, and then he's kind of struggled a bit to really find his form in the last few games. He's been kind of inconsistent. He only had 12 points in the game. But like Boston, they're really well-rounded and they're really deep. So, Tatum has a mediocre scoring night, but then Marcus Morris puts up 17 and 5, and Hayward had 18 points and 5 assists. It's like they have enough guys out there that scoring 115 a game shouldn't be an issue once they actually get their offense clicking, which it looks like is now happening in the second week of the season after the first week was a disaster. So I think this game could have been a 12-point win if they just didn't let Giannis kind of stampede over them, and then you would look at that as 12-point win down a starter over the number 1 team in the conference at the time. You would consider that, I think, a pretty significant victory. Yeah, I think that's fair.
You're probably right on this, and I do want to talk about the Boston defensive performance here, because even though they gave up like a 112 offensive rating, this felt like a pretty good Boston defensive performance. Like, even against Giannis, I thought they mostly did a pretty good job. Like, when Al Horford was on him, I thought that they mostly were okay. Later in the game, again, like you kind of mentioned, it was a bit of a struggle. Shimi Ojale, I thought, did really, really well against Giannis when matched up in that game, too. What do we think about the way that Boston went about defending Giannis, and what it says about the way they will defend Giannis in future series? Because I feel like this was a preview of a playoff series. I don't know if it's going to be the conference finals. I don't know if it's going to be the conference semifinals, but this had the feel of a playoff, not atmosphere, but kind of like a playoff preview.
I mean, I certainly hope they face him in the playoffs. I love covering Giannis last year. Probably one of my favorite series I've ever covered was last year's first round. So, I mean, Boston probably matches up covering Giannis better than any team in the league, because you have Ojale, who matches up well with him because Ojale has enough power that he can be physical with him before he gets into the paint and try to prevent him from just doing those plays where he's just like, once Giannis is in the paint, he could just reach out and dunk it. I'm not sure. I don't think we really saw a ton of the freedom of movement foul calls really impact guarding Giannis in this game. So It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I figured that's going to be a major issue, basically, so last year they were able to switch Giannis across the board a lot of the time when they had Ojale out there, where, Jaylen could switch onto him, Tatum could switch onto him, and now, of course, with Hayward can match up decently against him too. So they have those lineups with Ojale out there. They can switch almost anybody onto Giannis. But one of the keys that the Celtics always do when they switch, which is what most teams do, and that's why we have these freedom of movement points of emphasis in place now, is when you switch a guy off the ball, you're supposed to grab him around the waist and kind of hold him back while he's trying to run away, and that allows you to switch seamlessly and catch up with them. And now they're going to call a foul for that, and they've been pretty consistent about calling that foul so far, I think. So, I wonder if that's going to make things a lot harder for Ojale, because with his power, that would be really big for him to allow him to get between Giannis and the basket and kind of reset and stuff like that. So I don't know how it's going to play out in the playoff series, and who knows how much they're going to enforce the points of emphasis. I mean, I interviewed Monty McCutcheon earlier this year for The Athletic, or earlier this season, which I guess was really like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he said that they're planning on being really focused on emphasizing this stuff all the way through the finals. So it's definitely going to change the way that you have to guard Giannis, because it makes switching on him more and more difficult. And in Ojale, I mean, he's kind of the key to everything with them, because he last year was just a spot-up shooter. He was a very inconsistent spot-up shooter. This year, he's trying to be better at grabbing and going from the perimeter, being more effective in transition, being a little bit more well-rounded of an offensive player. If they can keep him on the floor and their offense is still good, and they can still have an offensive rating over 105 or 110 or whatever, that gives them a huge advantage over Milwaukee. But obviously, who knows if they're going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, last night when Shimmy was on the floor, they had a 129.2 offensive rating. I would bet you that this will be the only time that Boston's player with the highest offensive rating while he's on the floor is Shimmy Ojale.
Hey, there's a first time for everything in the NBA. It was his first NBA start. He had, I think, 10 points. So
he had 2 dunks?
Yeah, that's right. He actually had 1 dunk where it was kind of like the Manu or Kobe 2000s reverse dunk, where you jump from almost a block on the other side of the basket and do a reverse slam. That was really impressive.
Yeah,
people in the stands were surprised by that. They couldn't even tell what they were looking at.
Yeah, he kind of caught Brooke as well. Brooke Lopez did not think that was coming. So let's just in general, let's wrap this up. Let's wrap up Boston. Where do we think this team is right now? They had an iffy start to the season, and now they're sitting at 6-2. They're exactly where we expected they would be, and they have the look of an NBA Finals team. And this comes on the heels of Sam Amick over at The Athletic. Shout out to The Athletic, where we both work, noting that, this is the team that the Warriors are most afraid of. Do we think that do we think that's right? And do we think that this is where this goes from here?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we had it before the season. I don't think much has changed so far. Hayward looks kind of pretty not rejuvenated, but he just looks so much more comfortable after 6 games than he did after 2, which is a huge part of it. Yep. And yeah, it's Boston. We're starting to see that Boston's strategy for their offensive distribution is probably going to be super viable. And they finally had their first game where they actually had an offensive explosion on par with the way that the rest of the NBA is scoring. So they finally look like a normal 2018 NBA team in this game. But Jaylen Brown is hurt. He's dealing with this weird lingering foot sprain injury where he's feeling a pain over the top of his foot. And they can live with Daniel Tice being hurt, who's out with plantar fasciitis for probably at least 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a little bit more depending on how it heals. But Jaylen Brown dealing with a lingering foot injury at the beginning of the season, that's obviously a big red flag for this team's potential. I don't know if they can make the finals without Jaylen Brown playing his best basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, they need everyone, because Toronto is stacked. Milwaukee, I don't think their defensive strategy is that good yet, and they've had the best record in the league up to this last game. So it's Milwaukee can get way better, and of course they're not even using Thon Maker, and I think he's one of the most important players for their potential. So there's a lot of room to go here. And,
by the way, Milwaukee not playing up to their defensive potential, they're second in defensive rating right now.
and you know what? Stats be damned. Stats don't mean anything, right? Because it's funny. I wrote a piece, another shameless plug. I wrote a piece about how the Celtics defense needs a lot of work, and when I went to go write it, I was like, I got to go check their defensive rating. Turned out they were still number 1 in defensive rating in the NBA. And I was like, God damn it, how do I even make this story work? But I'm watching the film. I'm like, they're screwing up on a bunch of stuff here. Yeah. Kyrie Irving is still, not trying on defense in crunch time possessions. And I just asked him a question. He's like, I gotta pride myself on my defense. So it's like, there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, that's how defense works, right? It's like on defense, it's like you have a bunch of bad plays and it looks to the eye like you're not playing well, but then this is why we have defensive rating, and so that we don't focus on a couple bad plays and we can see the big picture of everything going well in general. So, I think Milwaukee's offensive scheme might work really well against most teams in the NBA, but it doesn't work well against Boston, probably won't work well against Toronto, depending who they have out there, and obviously won't work against Golden State. So they need to be able to go to Thon Maker, or put Giannis at the 5 and go small if they're, I mean, he's 7 feet, so I guess it's not really go small, right? But they need to go small and defend small lineups in crunch time. They need to be comfortable with that. And until they do that, I think they're gonna hit a ceiling that's lower than what Boston, Toronto, and probably Philly still can even hit.
So we've kind of talked around Milwaukee's defense and noted that stats be damned. This is a pretty damning number for Milwaukee so far defensively. They've given up more wide open 3-point attempts per game than any team in the NBA. So not percentage wise, but just in terms of attempts. That's defender or shooter has no one within 6 feet of him on the opposing team, and they're still holding teams to a 31% mark from 3-point range. That's just not going to hold in general. That's just not the way that this tends to work.
And that is, I think the first stat you brought up there is a perfect epitomization or quantification, which I'm not sure is a word now they say it.
Quantification but epitomization is not.
Okay. So that stat shows what the problem is with them having a big center who's in drop coverage, is that Brook Lopez and John Henson are not going to chase out to the 3-point line if they sink into the post. And they're not going to do it. Brook Lopez is coming. Brook Lopez is a huge pickup for them offensively. It's one of the steals of the offseason. I know the Celtics would have probably gone after Brook Lopez if they weren't keeping Aaron Baines this offseason. So a lot of teams wanted him, especially at the price that Milwaukee got him for. But that's always going to be a weakness for them, is that they're not going to be able to run out at shooters when their center is supposed to be the one running out shooters. And that's what separates Golden State and Boston, and why those are the two best defenses in the NBA, is because those two teams, they'll have Draymond or Horford at center, and those guys are two of the best at closing out probably ever at their position.
Yeah, so you look at the percentages in terms of just teams giving up wide open 3-point looks. Of the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams that have given up.
Great counter.
Yeah, I know. I can count. Sort of. I'm actually not even sure I got the count right. But of the top 12 teams that have given up the most 3-point attempts per game that are wide open, 10 of those teams have given up a percentage that is over the league average. So you just have to look at this. The 3-point shooting is going to revert from Milwaukee, the opponent 3-point shooting. How they can adjust and counteract to it is going to be what's really interesting to watch for them going forward. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. Look, they've already had now meetings apparently about Luke Walton not being or not doing a good enough job, I guess. Magic Johnson is not happy, and the Lakers are in a position where they are 23rd in defense and 7th in offense, and that 7th in offense number is, I think, the worst that any LeBron team would have finished if this holds throughout the course of the regular season since 2012. So, look, I get that whenever you get Magic or you get LeBron James, that you have a different set of goals and you have a different set of hopes and dreams for your organization. But god damn, Magic, you're going to go sign who you signed this offseason and put the blame on Luke Walton?
I think it's crazy. I mean, they have Michael Beasley, who's not really playing, where they could have gotten so many other options that they could have either developed or just would be good defenders that would help this team. So, don't blame Luke Walton for the roster that you built, Magic. Who, by the way, Woj noted in his article that Magic is often deferring his work or the responsibility to Rob Pelinka because he's busy with his other businesses, which, hey, that's fine, but that's kind of more of what the owner's supposed to be doing, not what is Magic's title as a president basketball operations? I can't remember. Yeah. So yeah, if you're in that role, you are not supposed to be delegating out work. The other presidents of basketball operations, this is their only job. And this is going to be the issue when you bring in someone who's kind of like a glorified figurehead like Magic. And I mean, I've never been in a boardroom with Magic Johnson. I assume his success is because he is a very good business person. But like, we've all seen him do his commentary on basketball. He's known as the worst commentator in the history of basketball. So like, how much is he the one influencing the roster development versus Rob Pelinka is what I'm really curious about. And of course, I'm saying this as someone who's I've only talked to Magic like once. He was amazing. He was great. He was super charismatic. But he and I didn't really get into the weeds of whether or not to develop a second-round pick versus trying to use a vet min to acquire a gunner, stuff like that. So it's like, I don't really know what his roster development strategy is. And frankly, in all the pressers that he's done, I don't think he's ever really made it clear what the real ins and outs of his roster development strategy is. I think it's mostly gone to Pelinka. So it does seem kind of crazy that he would be the one scolding and reprimanding Luke Walton while the rest of the organization apparently is going, what the hell is going on over here? I mean, he and Jeannie are supposed to be in complete lockstep on all this stuff. So I'm hoping at least that he and Jeannie discussed this before they decided to do it. But Luke, we saw what Luke did with Golden State. I mean, that Golden State was not just like a wind-up toy that you just let roam free. He made them a perfect team, and he was the one running the ship. And even if it was Kerr's program, he was the one implementing it and making it go. And we know that a lot of those guys played their best basketball while Luke was on the floor. I think it trended better so that Draymond could be a better offensive player when Luke was out there. So it's like Luke knows what he's doing, and I can't think of any other coach out there besides Rick Pitino that would be better for this team. So that's a joke. So
please give me Rick Pitino coaching the Lakers.
Unless they're below 500 in February, I think this is insane to even entertain the idea that Luke Walton would be on the hot seat.
Here's the thing about all of this. The Lakers haven't even been that bad. They're sitting at 3-5 right now. They have a negative 0.1 net rating. They've played a tough schedule. They had to play San Antonio twice. They've had to play who else here? They've had to play Minnesota with Jimmy Butler. They've had to play Denver and Houston, which I guess might not be that tough right now, but Houston is still a good basketball team, we all think. They've had to play Portland. And they had two of their starters suspended. Right. So yeah. I get that whenever you have LeBron James starting 3-5 is bad, but they haven't been that bad. They haven't been this disaster that I think they often get discussed as. And I just don't understand why this has fallen on to Luke so far. Did we think that an offense with zero spacing around LeBron James was going to work to its fullest extent? Did we think that a defense that has all of these defenders who are, at best, guys who kind of care some of the time, and that includes LeBron early in the season, especially, what did we expect? What did you think Luke was going to do? If you were worried about this and you thought that you were questioning whether or not Luke was up for the job, in the off season, because clearly based off of what the results have been on the floor this year, they haven't been that bad. So if you're actually paying attention and you're actually watching and you were worried about this in the preseason, then why wouldn't you just fire Luke then? If you wanted to get a new coach in, start fresh. It's just insane to me, that we're even having this discussion right now.
I mean, I thought early on they kind of just looked like the team we were expecting them to look like this year. And we all know their roster is going to be very different next year, or hell, maybe even in February. It's going to make a big change. They're going to make a big trade. They're going to sign 1 to 2 big names. This team is a temporary bridge team, which is why, especially, it's why would you make a coaching team now? coaching change now if you know you're going to have a much more stacked roster next year? And I'm pretty sure there's one thing that Magic Johnson has, it's irrational confidence that he's going to do that. So, and it's not irrational, obviously, like it's pretty reasonable. So it would be, unless there is some sort of incredible coach that is out there, there's nothing to be done at this point except for trying to probably make another player acquisition that'll provide some sort of defensive stability. I mean, they have to recognize that they built a team that was going to have Rajon Rondo, LeBron James, and JaVale McGee in the starting lineup. 3 guys who are probably historically great defenders at their position when they want to be, and then are kind of, like they're basically matadors for half of the game otherwise. It's like you're going to have a very inconsistent defense out there if that's how you're going to roll the lineup out.
Yeah, I mean, again, this what it comes back to for me is this. Like, if you think that whenever you get these guys in, that Luke Walton is not the guy for your team, and look, like, I don't know how great of a coach Luke Walton is. Like, I think that we saw in Golden State, he was really, really good. I liked what he did for a lot of last year. Like, I thought that this Lakers team probably outperformed its talent level last year and its experience level. But if you thought that Luke wasn't the guy, or you were questioning whether or not Luke was the guy, why wouldn't you make the change in the offseason? Let LeBron bring in whoever he wants, or bring in who you want with consultation from LeBron. And then just build your culture. Use this year as a culture year. Use this year to figure out who you want to keep with these stars that you're going to bring in. And then go from there. Instead of what it seems like they're doing now. Like, they expected to win early this year despite assembling a roster that is clearly a bridge roster. And like now have Luke kind of, out on the ledge here a little bit. Like, what are we? It's just kind of poor planning to me.
Well, hey, Ty Lue's available now if you want him.
I mean, the funniest possible result is the fact that Clutch Sports also represents Mark Jackson.
Oh, God. Well, they might have to fold the franchise if they do that. Nobody would be that stupid to do that.
I'll say this, I don't know if Mark Jackson is like the worst coach in the world. Like, he was fine, and he wasn't fine, but like he did an acceptable job in Golden State. Like, he developed those guys and brought them up to a place defensively, especially like where they got to, right? That's all I'll say about that. Like, you can do better.
His issues weren't with the on-court product. It was about his people management. It was about the fact that, he basically, he was, he's I think Bob Ryan once called him a Bible pounding scam artist or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he kind of walked around as like a holier than thou preacher, and he was a bit draconian and dictatorial in his management style. And it created like this massive fissure in his own staff of people that were chosen by him in the front office. And that's kind of why it all blew up in his face. I mean, the players liked him and they appreciated him. And he obviously did a lot for their careers, but like the problem with him was personality management. Like, there's one thing that Luke Walton's been really good with in his entire career as a player. It's been all about personality management and high profile talent management. And also, he has a long existing relationship with LeBron, and LeBron seems to be very supportive of him. And I guess that's really what it comes down to in the end. It's like, is LeBron on board with you or not? Because, Blatt, not David, but Blatt, as they called him, he knows more than anyone. Also, I think David Blatt's probably available if the Lakers want to hire him, too.
Well, you know who else is available? Because this human being just has the best sense of timing in the history of the world. LeVar Ball happened to be talking to Sky Sports as Adrian Wojnarowski's report went live. If you have Lonzo and you have the best player in the world, which is LeBron James, how do you not win a championship? If they need help to shoot, I'll coach them. I can coach them with my eyes closed. There's only one way to beat the Golden State Warriors is to go faster than them. If you have length and speed, you can beat them.
Why does LeVar Ball exist again?
Because he's Lonzo's dad?
Oh, my God. He's such an idiot. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. If they can outrun the Warriors, they do have a decent chance to beat them. Sure. I would really love to see LeVar Ball try to coach. I mean, we've seen him try to coach an AAU team, and he couldn't pull that off, so I'm pretty sure he can handle coaching the Lakers. Yeah, we need as little LeVar Ball in our lives as humanly possible here. But but LeVar Ball, the great basketball mind, does make a good point. It's probably why he beat MJ so many times in his illustrious career. That they need to be a high pace offense, which is to make up for the fact that they have a lot of young guys who aren't really good 3-point shooters yet, like his son. Or trying to get there, but are really good in transition. You have so many guys that are good in transition, and their offensive success early in the season was coming from them just running crazy amounts of fast breaks. So he is right that they should continue to do that. And I'm pretty sure Luke Walton isn't saying, guys, the pace is a little too much for me. Let's slow it down to a 93. Obviously he's trying to play at a high pace, but it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, of course it is. Jared, do you have anything you want to plug? Anything else you want to talk about?
I didn't even write this, but the NBA Heartbeat series on The Athletic is out, where a lot of our writers around the country are writing some really fascinating pieces on, who is the heartbeat of the franchise. And my buddy Jay King wrote a great piece, Marcus Smart, that, Marcus Smart is an endlessly fascinating human being, who all of us around the team, I think, really like and admire just because of who he is as a person, how he carries himself, the way that he acts so positive and open in the days after his mother passed away when I went to see him. And it's he's such a remarkably stoic and consistent and kind person. And any article that is ever written that really gets into a psyche, I think, is really worth reading. So definitely check that out. I'll have another piece coming up in a couple of days on The Athletic. And go subscribe. It's really cheap. You get to read everything Sam writes and literally everything that any one of us writes across the country for $3 a month. It's kind of a no. It's the mandatory subscription in sports, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited. This is going to be great. The Heartbeat series is really good. I have draft coverage, as we'll talk about here in a minute with Chris Stone coming up. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, man.
Before we get to Chris Stone, just a couple of quick advertisements. Chris and I know that 66% of men lose their hair by the age of 35, but the thing is that when you start to notice hair loss, it's too late. Wasn't it too late for you too, Chris?
Oh, yeah, it was well on its way.
Oh, my. It's just, once it goes, and you got to quickly rebound. You got to adjust on the fly to this stuff. It's like we talk about with basketball players. You got to adjust on the fly. You got to read and react. And Hims is your one-stop shop to read and react to hair loss. Hims is a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, sexual wellness, and it's for men. It connects you with real doctors, medical-grade solutions to treat hair loss. These are well-known generic equivalents to name brand solutions to help you keep your hair. There's no waiting room. There's no awkward doctor visits. You save hours by going to forhims.com. It really is just so easy. All you got to do is answer a few questions, and the doctor will review, and they can prescribe for you, and then products are shipped directly to your door. Order now, and my listeners will get $5 or get a trial month of Hims for just $5 right now while supplies last. See that website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to a doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/game theory. That's forhims.com/game theory. Forhims.com/game theory. Our second sponsor today is just that beautiful, awesome website called DraftKings. Basketball season is back, which means DraftKings is finally back, and you can put your basketball knowledge to the test with One Day Fantasy Basketball. No matter what your skill level is, there's a contest waiting for you at DraftKings. Drafting your team is simple. You just select 8 players and stay under the $50,000 salary cap. You earn points when your players score, assist, block, rebound, and more. And the best part is you get to draft a new team every day without any commitment. Go to DraftKings.com now and use my code THEORY, that's THEORY, to support the show and play for free with your first deposit. And remember, there will be $400 million in total prizes up for grabs throughout the season. That's code THEORY, THEORY, to play for free with your first deposit only at DraftKings. There's a minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details and use that code THEORY to support the show. That terrific voice that you heard talking about hair loss earlier was Chris Stone. Chris is with me. We're going to break down all of the forwards in this 2019 preseason NBA draft class. Chris, how's it going?
It's good, man. Still got no hair, so that's an ongoing issue for me. I'm on board with everybody getting after that as soon as they can.
How is that life with no hair? I mean, like, there's a real chance at some point soon I'm going to be just staring that right down the barrel.
So there was a period of time when it was really great, and I only had to cut my hair like once a week, and I cut it on my own. So it was free. I didn't pay for trips to the barbershop or anything like that. That was wonderful. But now, if I let it grow even like longer than 2 days, it looks really weird. And kind of looks like I have like the old Friar Tuck, where like the hair just goes around your back and nothing on top, because the hair on top is so light now that I like have to cut my hair like every 2 days. And that's somewhat miserable because it's a like 5 to 10 minute process.
Yeah, that would be terrible. Like, I don't even like having to take 5 to 10 minutes out of my day to like take the dog downstairs. And that is like when I get to hang out with the dog. So I can only imagine having to just cut your hair randomly. I guess I could cut my hair with the dog next to me. That would work.
I think that's an option. You become knowledgeable about razors. Like, my first go-to is I bought a barbershop quality like head shaver. I've moved on from that since, and now I'm down to the actual razors. But it's an adventure.
Are we talking about, like, do you use, like, one of those machetes that you see people use and just, like, slide it across your head?
No. I just use a regular razor.
Why not?
I don't know, man. I'm really terrified of, like, cutting the back of my head. Yeah. I did that once, and it was super awkward.
That seems...
It's obviously aggressively noticeable.
Yeah, that seems aggressively reasonable as well.
Yeah.
Also, just use Hims. That might help.
That would have been the move.
Let's talk about forwards in this draft class. By the time this goes out, you will not yet have read my pre-draft spiel that we have going out at The Athletic on Monday, but you are going to hopefully have seen some of the stuff that I've written. I've already written about Zion this year. I'll have Cam Reddish going up on Monday as well. I'll have a few different other players going up as well on Monday. But what is your general impression of this forward class before we get going?
As I was sifting through it, I feel like the top portion of it is quite good. But that's, I think, generally true for the totality of the draft. And it drops off to guys who are probably role players relatively quickly. I do think it's interesting to note that this collection includes guys who are both 3-4s and probably more 4 or 5 options at the NBA level. Mm-hmm. And so there's some, I think, still, or at least in my mind, I think that's true. And then I think there's some differentiation there that perhaps exists and maybe leads to some interesting questions. But, obviously the top of it's really strong. As you go down, I think it drops off fairly quickly to guys that I'm not super excited about. But I don't think it's a bad class. Kind of like the wing class that we mentioned being a good section of this draft. I think that this one is a pretty good section as well.
So where do you want to start? It's very clearly 2 guys. It's one of Zion Williamson or Cameron Reddish. Which one do you think has a greater ceiling? Let's start there.
So I think probably 2 months ago I might have said Cam Reddish, if only just because 6'9" point forward is really attractive and interesting. I think today I would say Zion. I've come around a ton on the ball handling and the passing ability, and I think that there is a world, and I don't know what the percentage chance was, and I was going to ask you this when we talked Zion, where Zion is a primary creator at the NBA level. I also think there's a world where he's like 2016 Draymond Green offense, where he's involved in ball screens, rolls, and kind of play makes from short rolls. But I think given that, and the fact that he's younger, more athletic, and that generally just tends to translate to more upside, that I would probably take Zion right now.
So yeah, Zion is about a year younger. It might be like 10 months or something like that. Than Cam Reddish. I would say he is... Would I say he's a better ball handler? I don't know. That's a tough question. They have very different styles. Yeah. They have very different styles of handling the ball. Zion is certainly a better open floor ball handler and decision maker, I would say. But in the half court, I might take Cam as a ball handler and straight line driver and creator.
That's probably reasonable, I suppose. I will say that I think Cam can pass better on the move in the half court than Zion can.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, but Zion's probably a better transition passer.
I agree with that. I think he's a better standstill passer as well. Zion's a really good standstill passer.
Yep.
But I think as far as scoring goes, I like Zion there a little bit more. I wrote about Zion for next week, and sort of the thing that I said is that his handling ability and his athleticism are this interesting symbiotic relationship where one plays off of the other really well. He had this play in one of their exhibitions, right, where he gets into the lane, jump stops between two defenders, and immediately explodes for a dunk. And it's just like, other guys don't do that.
No, like Zion genuinely, like we've seen guys like Cam Reddish before. Like Lamar Odom is not a terribly off comp for someone like Cam Reddish, right? Players of that ilk, like that is what Cam Reddish is. But we've never seen a guy like Zion. Like realistically, we have no basis of comparison because he just does shit on the floor that seems impossible. Like Cam Reddish is 6'9", and he does things that are exceedingly rare for a player that is 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. Like he can shoot a little bit, he can handle the ball, he can make decisions, he can be like a primary half court creator. But like we've seen guys do that before. We've never seen someone leap from 15 feet away and almost land in the crowd to block a shot. Like we've never seen a player who can literally like do a pull up on the top of the backboard by leaping. And that explosiveness extends to the way that he moves on the basketball floor. It extends to the way that he is capable of creating space with a very, very quick first step with the ball in his hands. And just the amount of ground that he can cover due to his sheer power as a player. This dude is just different as an athlete. Like I've never seen someone who combines this level of explosiveness with this power.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think one of the things that stuck out to me in watching some more Zion recently is he has offensive rebound plays where he grabs an offensive rebound and comes back to the ground, but then goes up and dunks it. And, like, that's not uncommon. We saw Marvin Bagley do that. We saw Manoa Carter, DeAndre Ayton. All of those guys do that. But those guys are 7 feet tall, and Zion is 6'7". And he just beats all of these guys off the ground to do that type of stuff that guys his size don't do. And I guess what draws me to Zion as a prospect in particular is exactly what you've said. We've never seen someone like him before. And so projecting what he will be is very difficult. But I think it is typically those unique guys who, when they break the mold, really break the mold and become those kind of outlier superstars. And I don't know that that's a thing that Zion is going to do, but I think perhaps more than anyone in this class, it's a thing that is possible with him.
Yes, I think that there is a world where he is super ridiculously explosive Draymond Green. Like I think
that's very.
Yeah, that was a really apt comparison. And if you are super ridiculously explosive Draymond Green who can handle the ball and pass it from a standstill and do everything that Draymond does on offense, just at an exceedingly higher level due to the athleticism, like that is easily an all-star offensively. Like that is just like an unbelievable player. Now the defense, I mean, there's a lot of potential for Zion's defense. The action plays are ridiculous. Like we see him block shots from 10 feet away because he's just able to jump at a different level than anyone is. We've seen him be able to really just explode forward into passing lanes and create transition opportunities. And whenever you're him, you're going to be able to finish those transition opportunities at a high level in transition defense to offense in a very quick way. The stuff that I think I need to see still is the lateral quickness in pick and roll coverages and the ability to not lose players in terms of like off ball coverages. Like there's a game against who was it? It was like the Oceanic team at Adidas Nations. He lost Cody Statman like 5 times for easy wide open threes in the Adidas Nations championship game. Again, like, you know, it's like a small thing because who the fuck cares? But like it is a thing that he needs to improve upon.
I mean, it's for sure clear that he likes to play sort of a safety role and just roam, right?
Yeah.
He wants to be chasing those blocks and getting that weak side help, and probably because, like in high school, he really needed to do that because his team didn't necessarily have someone who could defend at the rim. And he wants to be able to jump those passing lanes and get out in transition. He certainly gambles more than he needs to, but it's because he's successful so often that I think he does it. I'm with you on the perimeter mobility stuff. He is not necessarily the greatest at staying in front of someone. I do wonder a little bit how much of that is physical and how much of that is mental, because it's so easy for him to close that space from behind and block shots from behind that I wonder if he's just willing to accept on some level someone going by him. I don't know like what percentage is physical, what percentage is that, but I bet that there is some percentage of it that is that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question of it all here beyond this is, what does Zion look like when he's 25, right? He is obviously such an unbelievable physical athlete that I am not super concerned about him being an effective NBA player right now. Like, I think he would just be an effective NBA player right now. Where my concern comes in is he's been kind of nicked up and injured off and on for the last year. Mm-hmm. That is when the injury history that is when the weight gain has really come. Like, he was listed at 285 or whatever on Duke's site, like 282 or whatever it was.
He still is.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah. I looked last night because there was a mention that Udoka Azubuike was 270, and I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, look, Udoka is definitely heavier than Zion, I think. Like, if he's not...
that comparison to me was funny at the time.
It is very funny. But like at the NBA Top 100 camp in the summer of 2016, Zion was only 230 in like the way the kid's there. So like this wasn't like a bullshit 230. He like you look at him and he looks like he could afford to lose some weight, obviously, but he carries that 285 pretty well, right?
Yeah, he definitely does. I mean, I still think, obviously, that he could get smaller. You know, at McDonald's, I think he was listed at 255. And if you watch, like, a Duke preseason game and then immediately watch the McDonald's stuff, he is noticeably smaller, even, 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it changes much about his game to be 30 pounds lighter, 40 pounds lighter, whatever it is. It's, like you said, just a matter of potentially of long-term sustainability.
Right. That's like,
and that's a concern. It
the
really
pure
is.
Force that like his body accepts every time that he lands. The pure force that his knees use to lift his body up off the ground in such an unnatural way. The 30 extra pounds actually do matter there, I think, in terms of like staying healthy long term. And again, like this is a guy who clearly doesn't really have a problem putting on weight. What happens when that injury that befalls everyone except LeBron James essentially happens, right? Like, does he continue to retain that athleticism? Does his body like kind of balloon up a little bit? Like there are real worries there that come with the weight. Like it's not like making jokes about him being 285 pounds. It's real. Like he does have, like NBA teams have concerns there about like what the potential outcomes are long term whenever he gets hurt, especially given the fact that like, look, he's been hurt like 3 times in the last year. Like he landed heavily on his thumb at the McDonald's game. That might be a fluke, right, to some people, but like it's kind of like something that will happen at some point, right? He had like a foot injury in December last season. He had a minor knee injury in 2017 in the spring. Like these are things that are happening to his body, and I hope that he stays healthy because again, like he can be such a fun player. He can be a generationally gifted player who can be like a genuine all-NBA talent, I think. I am at that stage. I'm a little bit worried about what he looks like when he's 25, though.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an understandable worry. I really do. I just, the honest answer from my perspective is I don't know enough about, him personally and like diet, mentality, like how his body now is handling this. Like I assume Duke's doctors and fitness staff have like a much better idea than we do about how he's carrying that weight. And so I think it is fair to have that concern and to note it. I don't know where to fit it in terms of weighting, pun intended, into my analysis.
Sure. Let's talk about Cam now.
Sure.
Cam has concerns for a very different reason. Whereas Zion consistently plays hard with all of the force of his body, Cam does not do that. I'll just be honest. Like, I've never seen someone as talented as he is, like, show up to events like AAU events and exhibition events and all-star games and stuff like that, and show less of a desire to just like straight up compete against the best. You know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean. I saw him in the EYBL last summer, and I think I watched him in 2 different games live, and in one game he was outstanding. And best player on the floor, no question, most talented guy in the class. I think, you know, from my perspective...
I've seen him turn it on in a half, by the way. Like,
sure,
he sleptwalked through the first half, someone talks shit to him, and then he decides, oh yeah, fuck you, I'm going to destroy you.
Right. The second game I watched him, like, it was like he didn't play. And with someone as talented as him, and he may, from a skill standpoint, be the most talented player in the class. Like, if you made that argument, I would not necessarily fault you. It's very frustrating to see it with someone like that. Yeah,
like, I can't emphasize this enough. I've been saying this for, like, now 2 years, probably. I agree. I think he is like the most talented player from a skill perspective in this class. RJ has all of the intangibles and he's very, very polished. Nasir Little gets by on just like toughness and athleticism and everything like that. You know, we talked about Nasir. We talked about RJ last podcast that you and I did. Mm-hmm. With Cam, that dude just does stuff that naturally players who are 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan, they shouldn't be able to do. Yeah. He can shoot it. He has a very fluid stroke. It's a set shot. Like, he needs to iron some of it out, but he can absolutely knock down threes from behind the NBA line. He can pass it on the move in transition. He can pass it on the move in the half court. He can handle the ball in dribble handoff settings. He can run like pick and roll as the dive man and do a short roll, take a dribble and like dump a ball off to a cutter or lay it up himself. Like, there are things that he can do in the way that he sees the floor, in the natural way that he plays basketball, that, you know, guys his size shouldn't be able to do. And I get more frustrated watching him than any player in this class because I want to see him destroy and dominate and, you know, everything that goes along with that, because I've seen him do it, you know, from at differing times of his EYBL career. And I've seen him live probably 6 times, something in that range. Certainly more than 5 times. Like, probably like 10 games, something like that. So, like, he is... I've seen enough of him. I didn't see him on a bad day. This is a consistent thing that happens with him. And I'm interested to see how Duke affects that.
Yeah, you know, I'm not entirely sure that it's the best development situation for him. And now there are probably relevant questions about how much that 1 year of development really matters and if he were the guy, what he would get out of it. But it is very clear in watching them that RJ and Zion run that show. And also just that there's like sort of a bromance between RJ and Zion that exists that it's not clear Cam is a part of from, you know, an on-court chemistry perspective.
I do wonder if Cam being hurt throughout the Canada trip
don't think it helped.
Yeah, allowed those two to kind of develop a seamlessness that isn't there yet. Now, that's not to say that it won't get there, but like, you know, there is something there that is different with those two.
Yeah. And Duke is playing some lineups. You know, their lineups without Trey Jones, they don't really have a point guard. And you would think that a decent number of those possessions would go to Cam, given his skill set and, you know, how he's built. Those possessions are definitely going to RJ right now. And so I just sort of wonder where he fits in, you know, and how that translates or what that means for his development. And truthfully, maybe it means not much because it's a year and, you know, a lot of times guys don't make the same progress in college that we like to impart on them. But I do think it's an interesting question to follow. And if it allows him to just fall back into those habits of not being involved in the game.
So yeah, like that's like a really interesting way to put it, because there are two very real things that could happen here. Like, Cam could have gone and played for a UConn, like UConn was recruiting him, if I remember correctly, and could have dominated the ball at UConn and played for like a, you know, team that would be borderline top 25 if they got him, and we would have seen what happened there. Would that have engaged him better? Or would this situation where Duke is certainly competing, they're going to be in the title hunt all year, they are going to be trying to figure things out all year, and he is not going to be the number one option. Like, how does he react to that? There are just two very different ways that this could have gone, and like the road more or less traveled here is just so interesting to me because I don't really know what exactly to do.
Yeah, especially since he was the first person to commit to them, by the way. Like, he committed, I think, a month or two before RJ did, and obviously well before Zion did. And so he clearly committed, I think, with thoughts that he would be the guy. Now maybe he knew one of those two was coming.
Like, I think when you commit to Duke, you know that you're not going to get like all of them, you know? Like, you're not going to get all of the possessions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But like, you know, you probably didn't think you were going to get all three of those guys. And so that does create some weird things. But I mean, there's no doubt that he's talented. There's just no doubt. Like you said, where athleticism is the thing that magnifies Zion's game and skills, Cam's size, his height does that for him. And he's really special. It's just actualizing that special on a consistent basis is the struggle.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. He is the guy for me of the top four that he could go number one. He could go number 8. You know, his range of outcomes is very, very difficult to judge. Like, and of course, like all of this is like without knowing injuries and without knowing how they're going to test the medicals and stuff like that. But like, I feel pretty good about all of RJ, Nasir Little, and Zion going in the top 5.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cam has a wide range of outcomes for a player who is ranked this highly coming into the season.
Yeah, and to be honest, he probably shouldn't have that wide range of outcomes.
No, he should be like a lock top 3 pick.
Yeah, I agree, especially in a weak class like this. Let's move on. Let's get into like this next tier. So Sekou Doumbouya is certainly the next guy for most people. He's not the next guy for me, but he is going to be the guy who is like considered next, right? For most.
I think that's probably right, yeah.
So this kind of tier here is Sekou, DeAndre Hunter, and Rui Hachimura. I have Sekou third out of that group, but I think it's worth talking about him first within that group. So
sure.
Sekou came to Basketball Without Borders last year. That was the first time that I'd seen him live. I had seen a lot of video of him because he has been like an underage star of international events for a while now. Like he was playing the U18 Euros when he was 26 or in 2016, 2 years ago. He's still eligible to be playing U18 Euros. Like he's still so young that it's kind of ridiculous what he's done. He made that 2016 European Championships like all tournament team at 16 or 15 years old at the time because he averaged 18 points. Like he has been the next guy that's coming in Europe for a few years now. I'm a little bit worried that we haven't seen the development from him over the course of the last few years that I was hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, what sort of development does that look like? Like, where would he be now if he developed along that curve? And the answer is probably like very, very far along, obvious number 1 pick discussion, right?
Right. But that's what he was being discussed as at that stage.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
He was being discussed as a potential top 3 pick in 2019.
Right. And instead, what we have is someone who's putting up 5.5 points and 3 rebounds in 16 minutes a game in the top French league, and that's not necessarily impressive. Now, we're going to talk Rui here in a minute, but I think one of the things that perhaps separates those two guys is age, where, Rui gets a lot of the still developing comments, but Rui's almost 21 years old, whereas Sekou is 18 at the end of December. And so, in reality, he really is still developing who he is as a player. Now, the fact that there hasn't been improvement over the past couple of years is scary and concerning, but he is also still really young, possesses a tremendous frame at 6'9", 6'11" wingspan. Certainly someone when he tries can be a multi-position defender. I think that there are a ton of questions about where he fits in offensively outside of transition.
Yeah.
But, that he's the youngest player in the class, I think. It would be hard not to with a late December birthday.
He is 8 days before the cut off. So, yeah.
Yeah. There is still a lot of room to grow there. It's just a question of how you foster that development.
And the way that you choose to go about it. Because right now, for me, when I look at him as like a second draft candidate. I think that like the first team that takes him should seriously consider leaving him in Europe for at least 1 year. Because there's still a long way to go here. But the problem is that the French league is generally just not known for its development. It's just not known as a strong league developmentally. There have been a lot of players that have come from France, and it's a very fertile ground for basketball players. But if you look at where those players have taken the biggest leaps in their game, it's after they leave France. Rudy Gobert is kind of a prime example of that in a lot of ways. So what scares me with Sekou is I don't know what an NBA team should do with, because I think it's pretty clear he's not ready to play in the NBA right now. Maybe by the end of the year that changes, but it doesn't seem like he's ready to play in the NBA right now.
I definitely agree with that.
What happens whenever you start his contract clock? Do you put yourself in a situation like the Suns are in right now with Dragan Bender? Do you put yourself in like a Mario Hezonja situation where Mario is 21, he was a little bit different, but like Dragan is probably the best comp here in that's a little bit scary. Like they're different players entirely, but in terms of where they are in their development, both physically and in terms of their game, like that's what scares people. Nobody doubts the upside here. Like he can eventually be a like starting quality NBA player if he continues along a strong developmental track and starts shooting threes and continues to develop as a multi-positional defender, like his frame and like his just general, effort level on that side of the floor indicates. But it's the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, comparing him to Dragan Bender, I don't think that's wrong. But I do think that if you select him with a pick that high, you have to go into it accepting that that's going to be the development path, right? You don't let him become a second draft candidate for another team, and you understand that maybe that leap is coming later than expected, and you just need that foresight. Now, not all NBA front offices have that, and not all NBA front offices have that option even, right? Like, there's pressures to do other things. Right. But I think that if you are selecting him, that should be your path. Now, whether or not you can bring that to reality and to fruition is another question, but I think you're right that he is certainly a ways away from being a relevant NBA player.
So, like, the team that interests me is like if you're Boston and you have multiple first-round picks. Like, that is... Like, that's the kind of team that interests me. Or if you're Brooklyn and you have a super strong development background, you end up with, like, the 10th pick in the draft, and you have multiple first-round picks this year with which you can try and find players who can succeed. Like, those are the situations that interest me more than any other.
Oh, of course. But, I mean, good development situations for any prospect, right, are going to be advantageous versus the bad ones. So
right.
I'm with you that, like, I think it is relevant for people to go back after the draft and think about where did this prospect end up and what does that mean for their development and how do they fit. But I think that that's probably true of everyone and not just him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true of everyone, but I think it's true of some prospects more than others.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Degrees of magnitude.
Right. Like, there are some prospects that are going to be fine. They're going to be who they are regardless of where they go for the most part. Like, I think DeAndre Hunter is going to be what he is. Like, we can move to DeAndre Hunter now. Like, I think that he'll be what he is, basically regardless of where he goes. Because
I think that's fair.
Yeah, because, like, he's 21 years old already. He's well-developed physically. He is a pretty capable shooter already. He is a good defender already. Like, the development portion of his game, it's certainly going to continue. He's 21 years old. Like, he's not what he is. Like, he's not a finished product already. But there's been enough there that the development track is slightly less important for him than it is for a Sekou Doumbouya.
Oh, for sure. And again, like, that's, I think, regularly true with older guys, too. Like, DeAndre is a more refined player. He's going to be more mature mentally entering into those situations, or at least you would, just by an age question, probably that's true. Not necessarily, obviously. But no, you're right. Like, we just have a more fully formed idea of what DeAndre Hunter is as a basketball player, and in that sense, it matters a little bit less. Now, if we're talking about ceiling type outcomes for DeAndre Hunter, then obviously it's going to matter more than that. But like you said, he is a much more fully formed player. He's already a terrific defender. He already has a pretty interesting and reasonable offensive game, particularly as a creator. And so with Hunter, to me, the question is just, what does that ceiling outcome look like? And I don't know that I know the answer to that, because I don't know that we've seen enough of volume in terms of creation, but it is really interesting.
So my kind of hot take this year is DeAndre Hunter, who did not start a game for Virginia at all last year, has never started a college basketball game. He is my number one returning prospect in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that after the Jonte injury, that's probably true for me as well.
So we've talked about a little bit like what we like about him. Just a multi-positional defender who's very good on guards, very good on bigs, pretty good passer, not necessarily an elite passer, really good creator with the ball in his hands, good from the mid-post area, understands spacing from playing in Virginia's scheme, understands how to move without the ball from playing in Virginia's scheme. Also, the jump shot is really coming along. Like, he can actually shoot the basketball now, and that is a very important thing for him. Like, the fact that he shot 38% from three, he only took 55 three attempts last year. I would like to see more of that this year. But you look at the mechanics, I think they actually look really good.
Yeah, I mean, my two biggest concerns, I think, with him as a prospect are what the three-point shooting looks like at a higher volume, because, like you said, he's a really low-volume three-point shooter with a decent free throw percentage. Now, can he maintain a good percentage on a higher level of or higher quantity of shots? That, I think, is unclear. Although the outlook is optimistic. And then the fact that he is one of the older prospects that we're talking about in this range obviously raises questions about development curves and what he can be long-term. But I think if people dig into the numbers and stuff a little bit on him, they can get excited about what that ceiling might look like. I was surprised when I went to Hoop Math and I saw that only 20% of his half-court field goal makes at the rim were assisted. That's a really low number for a player who plays the position that he does. I mean, that's a point guard number in many cases. And so I think there's a lot of intrigue there. I just wish I could see him do it more than he gets the opportunity to on Virginia in particular, because Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome need so many offensive possessions.
My hot take on Virginia also, just in general, is that if he's healthy, I don't think they lose to UMBC.
Ooh, wow, man, that's tough.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's probably true.
Because the way that he defends and the way that he can cause issues for teams on that side of the floor, and the way that he can be a multi-positional defender who could have cut off Jarius Lyles and really caused him issues in the pick and roll coverages where he just kind of destroyed them, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that would have posed that. I think it literally creates an entirely different game for what UMBC does.
Oh, that's for sure. He definitely changes the scheme of what they do and how they play, although, man, we might play that game 100 more times, and UMBC may not win another one even without DeAndre Hunter.
Probably true. So yeah, I have DeAndre very high. I look at him as like a potential starter. I think he's certainly a long-term rotation player in the NBA, and if the shot continues to be consistent and the defense shows up at the rate that it's shown up so far in his young career, I think he's probably an NBA starter. Like a fifth starter or fourth starter.
That's about
like
where
a
I would
starter,
hit.
yeah.
Sure.
The last guy here is Rui. I have a soft spot for Rui. Look behind the veil again for what's coming at The Athletic. I have a big Rui thing coming up on Monday. You should all go read it, because I've been talking to Rui now for like 3 years, and it's like the culmination of me talking to Rui for 3 years of like his development. So I'm excited for that to go up. But more than anything, I liked what he did in the second half of the season. I like the way that he has adjusted to playing within a team concept at Gonzaga. Like, you watch him with the Japan national team, he's, him and Nick Fazekas do like everything for them, which is a hilarious statement that Rui Hachimura and Nick Fazekas do everything for a team, but they do. The spacing happens. This is a good thing that Tommy Lloyd told me, like the assistant coach at Gonzaga. Like, when he was with Japan's youth teams, he didn't have to learn spacing. He didn't have to learn how to read and react, because everyone read and reacted around him, right? He was the sun and everyone else was the planets. Whereas at Gonzaga and whereas in the NBA, he's going to be a planet and needs to figure out how to play. And I like the growth that I saw there last year.
Yeah, I'm probably not as high on him as you are. He turns 21
like
in February.
10 or so. Like it's something in that
Yeah,
range.
I have him slightly lower than that probably, or would as of today. I don't know that he has shown enough as a player to earn the praise that he gets. He's a really efficient scorer inside the arc. He even has a little bit of some pull-up stuff that he showed in the, I think, FIBA World Cup games over the summer for Japan. Mm-hmm. But he is, as of now, until we see otherwise, a non-threat from the three-point line.
True.
Defensively, I think he's okay, but not good.
He's inconsistent, for sure. He tries to make a spectacular play, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. I just fear that we're treating him as a community, as a whole, whatever, like he's perhaps 19 and not soon to be 21.
That's reasonable. I would say that in terms of his basketball development, it probably is more commensurate with a 19-year-old, just in terms of like learning the game and learning where to be and just like pure actual basketball skills. I would say that it's more commensurate with a 19-year-old. I would be more scared about him being 21 thing if he wasn't so physically impressive already. Like he has a really quick first step.
He's a big dude.
Yeah. Well, he's 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan. He continues to like put on sustainable good weight, and he is super strong. Like you watch the way he runs the floor and like establishes super deep post presence immediately, and like just pins dudes like and gets the ball thrown into him for a quick, easy bucket. It's really impressive. He's very strong and he's very quick. And whenever you get him on the move, he knows how to leverage that combination of skills and make it work for him.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, he certainly looks the part of an NBA player. I think fitting him into a role becomes more difficult. If you told me like he's going to put on a little weight and play the 4 and small ball 5, which I like think is realistically a thing that might happen at Gonzaga with Killian Tilly out, that interests me a little bit more than someone who is more likely to play strictly the 4 because we're not sure what the three-point shot looks like in game action yet. And
well, honestly, I'll just be real with you. I think we do know what it looks like, and it's not very good.
That's fair. I was trying to be nice and generous.
Yeah. Like it's just cool for like I think it's fine to say that. You know what I mean? Like it's He would tell you that's where he needs to improve. Like he knows that he needs to shoot the ball.
And I guess I would think that having a non-shooting player at that particular position at the 4 and not the 5 nominally is much more problematic than if he fits in somewhere potentially down the line as a small ball 5 in some number of lineups.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you that I think he probably starts at the 5 for them to start game 1 because of Tilly being out and because Jakob Larsson just like decided to leave the team. What I will say here is that their best lineup is probably Josh Perkins, Zach Norvell, Corey Kispert, Brandon Clark, and Rui Hachimura. And then
that lineup is a really good college basketball lineup, by the way.
That lineup is, I will tell you right now, until Tilly comes back, that is probably one of my favorite lineups in basketball, in college basketball. It is
for sure.
So fun. And then they bring up Gino Crandall off the bench, who's interesting at the very least. They have Filip Petrushev, the kid from Montverde Academy, who is a very, very high-end Serbian prospect, who's like a top 60 recruit in this class for most people. Coming up off the bench, like he'll play a lot of minutes. It's just very interesting to see what they do and where they go from here. And then like Greg Foster is another guy. He's like one of these point guards who is 6'5", who can play multiple positions. And Joel Ayayi is like 6'4" and can play multiple positions across the backcourt. They just keep recruiting these guys who are multi-positional, and I love the way that they recruit in every way.
Yeah, 100%. They build a really interesting roster every year.
But with Rui, I agree with you that I think the best way to go about it is to play him at the 5 and just let him dominate. Because if you play him at the 5 against college basketball 5s, he is way too fucking fast for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even at the NBA level, that may turn out to be his best position.
It could be, yeah. Play him as a super small ball 5. Like, he keeps putting on really, really good weight. Like, if you continue to, like, see him in person, he just keeps adding weight and adding weight. And then at the Final Four in 2017, I guess that was, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the year that they had Shemek Karnowski, they do, like, a big eating competition every year, and he beat Shemek Karnowski in the eating competition.
Dude, that's strong.
Yeah, I love it.
So strong.
But yeah, like Rui, I get the concerns. I get the worries here. I just really like the athleticism combination and the way that he leverages his strength with his athleticism.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good reason to like him.
So I have another tier here that is coming up. Hashtag tiers. We've got Louis King. We've got who else here? We've got Jaylen Hoard for me. PJ Washington. Yep. I would say that Darius Bazley fits in this tier for me as well. That's about it.
Yeah, that sounds about right for me.
Herb Jones maybe as well. I have Herb Jones a little bit lower than some people do because offense, but we talked about Herb last time too. So
yeah.
He's like kind of a, we don't really know what he is yet offensively, so it's hard to position him. But let's start with, I guess, Louis King, right? Played on the same team as Cam Reddish and AAU. Kind of shared the point guard, like lead ball handler duties. So they're both very skilled players. Louis going to Oregon this year. I'm very interested to see the way Dana Altman utilizes him because for me, he is the prototypical like Dana Altman 4. Like you could not like develop a Dana Altman 4 better than Louis King because of the way that he handles the ball, because of the way that he can kind of shoot it a little bit, because of the way he can create plays. He can drive from the mid post. Like he can do everything that Dana Altman wants him to do as a 4. I just don't know if they're going to play him at the 4 because they have both Bol and Kenny Wooten, and they also have Paul White and Miles Norris.
Yeah. So that Cam Reddish game where Cam, that I mentioned earlier, where Cam just like wasn't involved, Louis King just dominated that game. He is really, really good when he's good. Gets to the rim well, finishes at the rim well. I'm a huge fan of his slashing ability. Like you said, can make plays, stuff like that. I don't know what his development at Oregon is going to look like because he still hasn't played. He did not play in their exhibition game. He tore his meniscus back in January, and I believe Dana Altman said they're hoping that he's back at the beginning of December and then plan to bring him along slowly with not in name but potentially a minutes restriction. And that, to me, is concerning because I just don't know how much we're going to get to actually see of him full strength versus college competition.
Well, like, here's the thing. He's not a good enough prospect to go one and done without people having seen him.
Right.
So, like, we will see him at some point. It's just whether or not he has to go 2 years or has to go 1.
Oh, for sure. It's always a struggle, I think, for kids, and we kind of mentioned this with Cam earlier and missing the Canada trip. It's tough to come into those situations without that practice time.
Yeah. Because
the jump from high school to college is pretty significant. And particularly for guys who don't necessarily have the biggest bodies. Like Louis King's, I think, 6'7", 190.
Yeah.
And he turns 20 in April, so he's a little older for this class too. And so I'm disappointed we aren't going to get to see him until probably the beginning of December, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, and, again, like as I kind of mentioned at the top, a really interesting kind of... I guess the way I would describe him is as a smaller point forward, like more, I guess he is like more of a traditional 3 kind of, but he can just really handle the ball and really create in a straight line. He plays really tough for his size, like despite being very skinny, he's physical, really likes to get to the basket and finish. Jump shot is still a work in progress for him, but he's a very talented player, and I'm very excited to see where his development goes from here, especially on the defensive end, because he has potential to be a very, very good defensive player.
Yeah, he's long and can compete on that end, can guard multiple positions on that end. Like you said, I think he trends more towards the 3-4 combo than the 4-5 combo here.
For sure, yeah.
But he definitely has the potential to be a very good defender. and just a very good two-way player in general, given his playmaking ability from the wing.
All right, let's talk about who do we want to talk about next? Bazley?
I mean, we can do that, yeah.
Darius Bazley has obviously been in the news. Shout out Darius Bazley. You talked about him with M-Grads on the podcast last week.
Young billionaire.
What do we think of Darius Bazley as a prospect?
I'm not a particularly big fan. He is young. He just turned 18 in June, which I think perhaps explains some of why he, in the times that I've seen him, has struggled physically to get into the game. He's 6'9", 200 pounds. He's a willing defender, I think, sometimes. The jumper, to me, is questionable and often relies on settling for long twos with a bit of a funky shooting motion, and that's not great. There are certainly moments where he does something and you just say, holy shit, that kid is 6'9", and he just did that thing. But there's a lot, I think, of waiting for that to occur.
Yeah, definitely a flashes player right now more than like a whole package player. You know what I mean? 6'9", great body control. Like, you watch him, he can really hang in the air, contort his body well to finish from different angles, can handle the ball a little bit, can maybe at some point shoot the basketball a little bit. Like, he has potential to do that. He's just not there yet. Very, very skinny. As I talk about often on the podcast, he is, or not him, but like just in general, guys that are this skinny, it takes them some time a lot of the time to develop as shooters because they just don't have the strength and the endurance oftentimes yet to repeat their shot mechanics consistently. So that has potential to work out for him. Definitely a guy that most scouts would have liked to see play high-end basketball, be it in the G League, be it in college, just to get more of a sample because he is so young. He just turned 18 in June. They really don't have a great feel for where his game is yet.
Yeah, and it's tough. We're not going to get any of that. I don't think we'll see him play basketball until he starts playing in the NBA or in the G League or whatever he's doing next season.
He's working for New Balance next season. He's going to be
Sorry, I meant
workouts.
I meant next season.
Yeah. The next time we see him is in workouts.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan, just straight up, but I understand the attraction. Given the size and some of the skill involved. But he is not someone who I would be eager to select in the draft. Yeah,
I mean, guys like him, I tend to fade those guys just because I like if I'm a GM and I'm taking someone whose upside I think is probably starter, right? Like, he's probably not going to be like a superstar. I like to take older guys in that role because they develop more quickly and I get more value out of them on rookie scale contracts. But I understand the appeal behind a Darius Bazley, and at some point the upside overrides what the certainty is over his game. And my guess is that for some team, it's going to be like around like 20th overall. Like I would bet that he goes somewhere around 20th. But for another team, he could be easily like outside of the top 35. Like if you told me that a team did not have him highly rated, I'd be like, yep, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Last guy here, Jaylen Hoard. I am a big Jaylen Hoard believer. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I haven't seen a ton of him, but from what I have seen, he fits the mold of a lot of things I like. 6'9", 7'1" wingspan. Although weirdly measured a small 8'9" standing reach for someone that tall. But I think he's a capable, willing passer, can finish in traffic, a real functional run and jump athlete who moves well. I don't think that he's an elite ball handler, but he is someone who I think can get to the rim and has a really nice like dump off game when he gets there, like little one-handed wraparound passes or like through traffic passes that are really interesting and unique for someone of his size. The jumper's not there, and I'm not sure that I don't think he's ever had to have it there, right? Just given size and athleticism and stuff like that. But he's the type of player who, in this range, I'm more enticed by because the athleticism and the physical size is definitely there.
Yeah, so I've got him, near the end of the first round. More of a, mid-range attacker right now. Like, he's a lot more comfortable facing up and then driving as opposed to, taking a guy from behind the three-point arc, slashing in a straight line, and then, finding a guy on the move. That's fine. Like, you can be valuable that way, but you have to keep extending your game out further and further as you keep developing. Again, he just hasn't had to do that yet. We'll see if that takes off this year at Wake Forest. A little bit older for the class. He turns 20 before the end of the college basketball season. Very, very quick twitch athlete from what I've seen. Good first step, good lateral quickness for his size. Runs the floor pretty well, seems to react to what's happening around the floor really well. The key is going to be the jump shot. Like, he's got to show something in terms of the jump shot. But guys like him, like, you can look around the league and you can see why they are valuable. Like Mo Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu for the Portland Trailblazers stand out. Jeremy Grant just got $30 million this summer from Oklahoma City, and I don't think that was like a crazy contract. So, like, there is value in players that are just athletic and play hard and can switch defensively and do a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, 100%. That's obviously, I think that's why he's more attractive to me than someone like, say, Darius Bazley.
Is he more attractive to you than Rui Hachimura?
Probably not yet,
yeah.
But he might be.
So the guy that I actually have ahead of this like group here, like Louis King and Jaylen Hoard and Darius Bazley, is PJ Washington. I think PJ Washington is going to have a massive year.
Yeah, you got to sell me on PJ. I'm not the biggest fan.
So I think that he has potential to shoot it. You looked at some of the stuff in the, the Bahamas earlier this summer. The shot looks like it's worked out. I love him. We should probably have put PJ with the bigs, to be honest, because like he's another one that I love.
Yeah, he's clearly, I think, like a 4-5 guy.
Yeah, he's like a combo 4-5 who is super, like, he's very athletic. You can have him switch out on the perimeter. He's super strong. He's another guy where I like the way he leverages his strength with his athletic power. There's just a lot of skill there, I think. Like, he's a reasonably decent passer. He plays super, super hard. Like, he just strikes me as one of those, like, off the bench, like, come in, do the dirty work, and, you know, he ends up with 9 points and 7 rebounds in 14 minutes and turns games sometimes.
Yeah, he is much more palatable to me as a 4-5 kind of guy, small ball 5, 4 easy, than the small forward role he might play at Kentucky sometimes this year, which makes me want to throw up a little bit in my mouth.
Yeah.
I would like to see the shot on a higher volume. He only took 26 three-point attempts last year, shot 61% from the foul line. Those are obviously not promising numbers from that perspective. I agree with you a ton about the way that he actualizes his athleticism and his strength, particularly defensively. I think that there's a lot of versatility there. Averaged a block or 1.2 blocks and a steal per 40 minutes. That's great. And I think he can create a ton of mismatches on offense against certain 4s and definitely against 5s. And that's interesting. I just sort of wonder how a player who is limited to perhaps that role, what value to assign to that.
Yeah, I think that it's a situational role more than anything. Sure. We're into the place where I think a lot of these guys are more situational than anything.
For sure.
So another guy that kind of strikes me as that is Eric Paschall at Villanova. You probably started hearing Eric Paschall's name if you follow the draft as closely as Chris and I do. This summer, he absolutely balled out on the summer circuit at these camps where college kids go and play against other really, really good college kids. I believe that Nike Basketball Academy was his breakout point. And I've long been on the Eric Paschall train, like 2 years ago when he first got to Villanova, or I guess like a year and a half ago or whatever. I was like, this guy is a small ball 5. He is destroying what other teams try and do. Perfect switchable guy. He's like their second most important piece behind Josh Hart. Maybe you can make a case for Jalen Brunson as well there. He is super, super valuable. I am a little bit worried about being a bit too high on him right now based off of camps.
Yes, I agree. Like, a short-term performance at the Nike Basketball Academy does not necessarily override 2 years of performance at Villanova. Now, I will say, I've heard the Eric Paschall NBA prospect drum beaten for 2 years by Will Schriefer, who some of you may know from doing awesome data stuff with college analytics. So he's certainly a real NBA draft prospect, but I think he is like PJ Washington at his best as a center, and can you really consistently play a center who's 6'7.5"? He is a lower volume 3-point shooter over the last couple of years, 32% career, 78% free throw shooter. The jump shot probably should be there, and the fact that he's a little bit lower matters less as you move up the position chart. But I'm not super excited about him as a prospect because I don't know that he's going to be defensively what you need him to be at the position that he's going to play. He's not great protecting the rim. He's not great turning away shots. He can certainly beat bigs on the offensive end, but I just don't know that he can do it defensively.
Yeah, to me, he's an NBA 4. Like, he's not PJ Washington, who has this ridiculously, like, PJ has a plus, I think, 8 wingspan, something like that.
Something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Paschall's at like plus 4, plus 3, something like that. He is, to me, more of a 4 that can switch a lot of defensive actions and be useful as like a rotation player. And that has value. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I have him at like 32-ish. Like, I don't know. Go read my draft board on The Athletic on Monday. I forget. I'm like 30s right now. I'm interested. I've always really liked him as a player, but like I've legit talked to some NBA scouts who think he's like a mid-first round pick right now, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I'm much more interested in the 30s or 40s than I would be in the like teens. I just don't think
to the draft more than anything.
Of course, 100%. There are a lot of players who can fit in that range.
Right.
But I'm unprepared to let one camp override what I've seen for the last couple of years from him.
Sure. Next kind of group here. Admiral Schofield, Isaiah Roby, Oshae Brissett. Do we want to jump into anyone else crazily?
I would put Dedric Lawson up in this range.
Yes. Okay, Dedric's in that range for me too.
Yeah, I think that would be my grouping. I don't have a particular preference for any of them.
Neither do I really. If you made me pick one, I think I would probably take Dedric, but
I think I would too. Why don't we start there?
So Dedric Lawson is a remarkably skilled kind of, I don't know, would you call him a 4-5? He played the 4-5 at Memphis. He's probably going to be like a pure 4 this year, right?
He will probably play mostly the 4 and a little bit of 5. But I think he is at the NBA level at 4'5".
6'8", 7'2" wingspan, so plus 6 wingspan. Like, he can do that in college. Last year at Memphis, by his last year, 2016-17 season, right. 19.2 points, 9.9 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 2.1 blocks, 1.3 steals. Shot some threes, didn't really make them. Went to the Combine, was the least athletic guy at the Combine that year. My hope is that he has improved his frame and improved his athleticism levels in general and makes himself a guy that is a bit more interesting to NBA evaluators because the skill level is there.
He was quite literally the old dude at the YMCA. Just incredibly skilled, but not at all athletic. I will say in some of their preseason games, he's thrown down some dunks that make you think he's got a little more vertical pop than he used to have, which is obviously a plus for someone who has one of probably the higher basketball IQs in the draft. He's a great passer, really good free safety type defender, protects the rim from the weak side, jumps passing lanes, gets steals, just sort of seems to always know where the ball is. And that's obviously valuable. He is someone who I think at his peak, an offense could run some number of possessions through him anywhere on the floor. And that's really valuable, especially in this particular range. Now, the threshold of athleticism is the real question. Like, there's a chance he's just not athletic enough to compete against NBA players. But if he is, I think he's a really interesting and good prospect, and I think that there's a chance that he goes fairly high in the draft. And by fairly high, I mean somewhere in the first round. Yeah,
like if you told me he went in the teens, I would not be surprised. I'm going to have him lower than that. Like, I have him like somewhere in the 50s probably. But like, if you told me he goes in the teens because he blows up this season and is like a first-team All-American, wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, there's a real chance, I think, that he's the best player in college basketball this year.
Admiral Schofield, maybe the most unique prospect this year. 6'4" with a 7-foot wingspan, built quite literally like the kind of tank that an Admiral would ride on.
He's a shorter Zion, dude.
Not that athletic, like nowhere near that.
Sorry, my notes say shorter Zion without the same athleticism.
Yeah, but can really switch defensively. Like multi-positional defender, can play physically in the post, can shoot a little bit. 37% career from 3, 39% each of the last 2 seasons. Last year he did it on pretty good volume as well, almost 5 threes a game. Passes it reasonably well as well for a player his size. I think he was like 1.5 assists a game last year, but not necessarily a guy that you like would fully trust to initiate offense. Your prototypical 5th guy on the floor offensively who can knock down some shots and defend multiple positions.
I think that's a great summary, and really that's all he is, and that's good.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty good. I think
that's pretty good.
I have him more highly than what I think people will expect. not like top 35, but have him pretty high.
Yeah, I do too.
Isaiah Roby, kind of like a super athletic dude who is still figuring things out a little bit. Only averaged like 8.7 points and 6.3 rebounds a game, but certainly came on later in the season and was much more valuable and efficient during the course of Big Ten play. Beyond just being like a big athlete who can occasionally knock down the three and really get out in transition and occasionally defend and pass it a little bit, which like that's actually kind of a lot of skills, but they haven't all been actualized yet though. There's like no glue holding it together, you know?
Yeah. No, that's right. He's only taken 63s over 2 seasons. That to me is obviously the place that needs to show the most improvement if we're going to rely on him in this type of position at the NBA level. The defensive numbers are kind of ridiculous. He's a 6'8" forward who averaged a steal and 3.3 blocks per 40 minutes last season, which is just insane. He was really efficient on 2s last year, but I think ran pretty hot as a jump shooter over a somewhat small sample size. Yeah. So seeing improvement in that jump shot in that offensive game is what is his path to a higher draft position, but he's obviously an interesting prospect just given, what I think he can probably do defensively.
Yeah, you mentioned the block rate and the steal rate. I'd also mention that he was top 8 in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding rate as well. Yeah. Despite being like a 6'8" dude who's still pretty skinny. Like he does pretty good job of holding down position, knows his role offensively. But like I said, like he needs to have a more well-defined role offensively in the half court for me to be interested as an NBA team. Because the defense is there. Like the defensive potential is very, very interesting. But he really needs to be able to shoot it, I think.
I agree with that.
Next group here. We've talked about everyone in that group, right?
Oshae
Brissett, yeah. Very weirdly inefficient year, but also kind of intriguing in a lot of ways because he was able to take on such high volume at such a young age. 14.9 points and 9 rebounds a game for Syracuse as a freshman is pretty good. Played 1 billion minutes a game. I think he might have played 1 billion minutes throughout the course of last season. The advanced analytics aren't fantastic on him, but I think it's more due to role. Like he had to be their second option last year, when in reality he's more of like a dirty work, go crash the offensive glass, go destroy the defensive glass and grab and go, and occasionally post, drive straight line, and do things like that.
There's a real chance that he's a much more attractive prospect in a different role. He'll be 21 before the draft. He's a sophomore this year. You mentioned the advanced numbers. He had a sub 50% true shooting percentage, which is really difficult to do. And for a player of his stature, only made 37% of his 2s. And just sort of out of curiosity, I plugged into Basketball Reference guys, freshmen who had played 1,000 minutes in a season and had a worse than 40% 2-point percentage. And you will find guys who get drafted, but you will not find very many guys who stuck as pros. Mm-hmm. And the guys who did stick will mostly be point guards who were small and didn't know how to finish. So I think that there's pretty good reason to be concerned about what he can be at the NBA level. But like you said, there are flashes there that exist in terms of length and size. He can shoot it a little bit, and that might be good enough.
Yeah, and contextual factors as well, just in terms of what he was asked to do last year. Next group here, this will probably be the last group, I guess. Juwan Morgan, Dylan Windler, Brandon Clark, Shaker Houston, Bob Franks, KZ Apala, Markis McDuffie, Cam Johnson.
Yep, that sounds about right to me.
Anyone there that catches your eye?
Cameron Johnson is interesting to me. He turns 23 in March, so he's super duper old. For an NBA prospect, he's still younger than me. But he has positional size at 6'8" and 210. He's a career 38% three-point shooter, 80% from the free throw line. is primarily going to be a spot-up shooting threat, low usage at the NBA level, but he's smart, has a positive assist-to-turnover ratio, and is just someone I think in this group and maybe in this collection of players that you can feel most comfortable about knocking down shots. And that, in and of itself, is intriguing to me.
So I am going to bring up Brandon Clark. To me, Brandon Clark is like just the most interesting guy. It's just a total freak athlete. Like, cannot be emphasized enough. An absolute freak athlete. 6'7". I don't have a wingspan on him. Do you have like any length measurements?
I do not.
Yeah, like I don't know what his arms look pretty long, and he's super bouncy. Transferred into Gonzaga last year after 2 years at San Jose State. San Jose State, remember, is in the Mountain West. They were atrocious when he was there. They were absolutely atrocious. I think Dave Wojcik got fired like the year that he left. And yeah, Jean Prelot is there now. But that year in the Mountain West, 17 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 2.6 blocks, 1.2 steals, and shot 59% from the field, despite being the only guy that anybody who played them cared about on the other team. Like, the scouting report would have said Brandon Clark in the first 4 positions, and then, like, whoever the hell else they had. Really just a ridiculously productive player. His big thing was he couldn't shoot that year. Gonzaga's staff swears he can kind of shoot now. If he can shoot and he produces in the way that he produced at San Jose State, which, like, look, he's going to the West Coast Conference, like, not out of the question that this is a possibility. He is a real potential riser throughout the draft process, I think.
I think that's very in play. If he's able to maintain even some of that production, like 80% of that production or 75% of that production or something in a new conference, in a new role, I think it's very likely he rises up in the draft prospect. Now, admittedly, like, I haven't watched a ton of him because us East Coasters don't stay up to watch San Jose State late at night.
Man, come on. Stay up late.
But I will stay up late to watch him play at Gonzaga.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see where that goes.
All right, I don't know that we need to talk about any more of these guys. This podcast has been like 2 hours. Chris, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what you've got going on in your life, everything that you want to speak on.
Yeah, you can find my work at Sporting News, also on Twitter at Seastone Hoops. That's where all of the articles will come out, so you can keep up to the minute with that. I have an article on Zion coming out next week, and also I think something on RJ Barrett. That'll be a good primer for folks looking to jump into the top of this class.
I'm really excited. Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We'll be back next week with more interesting things to talk about. We'll probably do another draft podcast to produce the bigs, or to preview the bigs in terms of their production for this coming season.
We're going to make the bigs.
Turn that around. Yeah, that's great. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.